Joao, thank you so much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Guys, thank you very much for having me here. I met Jason from a very peculiar situation. I got an email from Uninte talking about one of the meetings you guys would have. It was an invitation. And what caught my attention was the lack of Black people in amongst the speakers. And I replied the email very bluntly saying I will not take part because I don't see myself represented there. I see no Black people. And that reply got Jason in touch with me, and we talked, and he shared a little bit of the work you guys do and who you are. And it was very interesting. I am Brazilian. I'm from Belo Horizonte. I am a professor at Cefet too. I took my undergrad course at UFMG, Faculdade de Letras, and my master's degree in applied linguistics at UFMG. And my doctorate was at Language Studies in Cefet, where I work and where I conduct a study group for ethnic relations and critical studies in applied linguistics, critical applied linguistics. And I have been, as I am a Black person and sometimes the only Black person in several different spaces, especially where higher education and high qualification is requested. Sometimes I'm the only Black person, so I tend to be very thoughtful, and I observe very thoroughly if other Black people will be present or not. And this interest of mine for ethnic relations and this racial discussion has been with me for a while now. In my master's, I was researching how Brazilian people were represented in textbook, the imagery of Brazilian people in textbook. And I wanted to assess if the people who were, if Brazilian people represented in textbook were, if the imagery was chosen without portraying any stereotypical features of Brazilian people, and how the book managed to address these issues. For my surprise, the images, the Brazilian images in textbook, in 574, from 574 images, only 54 was represented of Brazilian context and people. And amongst these images, many stereotypical features of Brazilian people were portrayed, such as Brazilian people, Brazilian men play soccer, Brazilian women can dance, and only things like that. And it was not brought to discussion other possibilities of existence for Brazilian people. Therefore, stereotypes of Brazilian people were portrayed freely. And I proposed a framework called Critical Visual Literacy Framework, which would allow teachers to address the imagery in textbook through a theoretical perspective of imagery itself, but also discussing these images with students and raising their awareness of such stereotypical features, but also bringing to the table other points that could be discussed, talked, thought of. So why am I saying this? Because I have been thinking about how Brazilians are portrayed and how we are represented and how people see us and talk about us and what images are and meaning making are constructed from that. And I've done that in my master's. The framework that I created during the master's was applied during my doctorate. And public school teachers, Brazilian public school teachers, applied the framework, used them, and assessed. And their appraisal of this framework was my main thesis of a critical visual literacy process that would get people to think about imagery and how they are represented and how and what meanings are constructed from the imagery that represent Brazilian people. So that got me through my master's and my doctorate. When I started working at a federal university, where I work, a situation very, very interesting happened between a professor and a student. Uh, Actually, the class, because the student that was amongst the problem, that was caught up in this problem, was not present, was absent at the time. The professor was calling the attendance list, checking the absent students, and he couldn't match the face and the name of the student. And he asked for his name, and when he noticed that he was not present, he asked the class who that student was, and the class mentioned his nickname, how they call him amongst the colleagues, the classmates. And the teacher then said, "Oh, I know who he is. He is that one with the steel wool hair," or in Portuguese, o aluno de cabelo de bombril. And the students came to me at the end of that class and they reported that. And they asked for advice. Well, I was taken aback by the situation because, well, that inappropriatedness of the situation is huge, right? So I told them I advised, well, I told them, I informed them that we have a secretary of gender, race, and affirmative actions within the institution, and that such comment is not supported nor tolerated within the institution, and that they should come for me again with the student so we could talk and decide what the student would like to do. And they came to me, and we took that to the board of directors from the institution. And, well, they reported the directors. A minute of the meeting was drawn. We didn't get a copy of it, but it was registered. And 6 months had passed, and I had heard nothing in return. So the professor was not told off, or they didn't come to him and ask for any explanation, and he did not apologize nor anything like that. So I decided as a researcher to write an article. First, I decided to investigate whether other Black people would suffer would be discriminated against because of their appearance. But as a researcher, I know that when we want to have answers for a specific question, we do not ask that specific question. We ask a set of questions, and amongst the answers, we pinch the answer that we want to investigate. So we don't influence the answers. I wanted to know if they were discriminated against, but I got a bunch of answers. 500 people got in touch with me and sent their autobiographical, let me see, autobiographic narratives or self-biographic narratives. It's the methodology name. And they told me a lot more than their thoughts and their auto narratives for regarding their appearance. They shared a lot more. And I wrote the article, and I had a limit of 8,000 words, and my article was 18,000 words long. And I decided not to shrink it to make it fit a magazine. I decided, or an academic journal. I decided to expand it, and I did that. And when I started analyzing other aspects within the answers that they provided, I realized that what I wanted to talk about, what I was talking about as Black aesthetics, uh, had was not related not only was related not only to the body aesthetics, their appearance, but a much broader concept of aesthetics as a philosophic construct. And then I started reading. So I stopped writing and I started reading Plato and Aristotle and uh, Saint Augustine and Kant and Hegel, and I got in touch with sociology and philosophy to understand what appreciation of beauty, how that appreciation, their appraisal was built, who thought of that, and how that, uh, and what impacts that way of thinking had over Black people's appearance. So I learned that when they were discussing what beauty was in Europe and what was art and what was not art, for instance, whilst they were doing that, Black people were being enslaved. Whilst they were deciding what was beauty and what was not, and what was art and what was not, the subjectives of Black people were being rejected. So, if the discourse that enslaved people, if the discourse that prevented people from their freedom of speech, their freedom of being who they are, based on their color, their skin tone complexion, and where they were from, as if all that was rejected in order to enslave them, how would the concept of beauty and their concept of beauty developed by and through white people's minds and thoughts whilst they were being enslaved, how would they get together? How come me, as a Black man, how can I be beautiful if the concept of beauty was built whilst I was being enslaved, and the discourse that enslaved me was the discourse that I was not human, that I was unable to produce knowledge, that I was unable to produce anything intelligent, anything relevant? How could that be? How could that be? So when I discovered that, I was able to look at the responses that the informants throughout the research, at the responses they gave me. When I looked at that, I discovered that not only their appearance was a point of discrimination, but also their art, their music. As we know in Brazil, samba was rejected and discriminated against up to 1946. During Getúlio Vargas' government, when he decided to build a national image of Brazil that would show other countries that we had a strong identity. With that in mind, he decided to get samba, change the percussions, add a guitar, a soft guitar, a soft white voice, and then samba was able to be played as bossa nova. Everything that belonged, all the cultural subjectives and black and all the cultural aesthetics of Black people that were rejected, when they started to raise the interest of capitalism and the capital, they were accepted. So that happened with samba. That happened 2 weeks ago with a mural and a painting in a big wall of a building in Belo Horizonte. This this artist, she painted a figure which is a female figure, and it represents black women, African black women, the ancestral, and all these aspects of African culture. And a man decided to sue the painting and willing to erase it because, according to his argument, it was of a doubtful taste. So again, the black aesthetics being rejected. 4 weeks ago, a black woman who wears braids in her hair, she was fired, she was made redundant at her workplace because she refused to take off the braids and straighten her hair. So all this uh, information like this and facts like that made me uh, develop my argument of an aesthetic racism that rejects black people's production, cultural and subjectiveness, and in their cultural production, their subjectiveness, and because of that, they cannot express themselves freely. They are discriminated against. So that was my argument, and it got me thinking how hurtful and how rejected and how unfit does someone need to feel to look at himself at the mirror and reject her own skin tone complexion? How uh, how how affected by racism? Sorry, how affected by racism does someone need to feel and need to be to take a mercury pill to change the pigmentation of her skin tone complexion? I was reading the other day, and as a data for the book writing, I was reading at the World Health Organization website that there was an alert in Ghana for telling pregnant women not to take mercury pills because they were taking the mercury pills to try to change the pigmentation of their babies within them. How unfit does a person need to feel to put her life at risk to try to reach a pattern of an universal beauty pattern that is untouchable? Me, as a black man, I will not be a white person, nor do I want that. But why would a person think that she should do that? So that's my argument in this aesthetic racism that rejects the black beauty, the black people's production, their culture, their history, their worth as humans. So that was what drove me to write. It started with the steel wool hair case, but when I got over 500 responses, I understood that it was much bigger than that, and that it was not a witch hunt against this professor. That would be low of me. It was a case of understanding how my subjectiveness is rejected because I am black, because what I produce, because where I come from. And talking about witch hunt, I learned just recently that women who were not, uh, women who didn't resemble the appearance of women in paintings during the 1600s, they were hunted and killed in a fire because they were accused of witchcraft, because they were not like the women in painting. And most of them were black women. They were killed simply because their beauty was not accepted as beauty. When you have a philosopher, Hegel, saying that black people are incapable of producing anything intelligent, or when you have, I'm not sure I can say that in English, but uh, Tomás de Aquino, he is a Portuguese man, right? São Tomás de Aquino saying that what's beautiful resembles God's appearance and is light, white, symmetric, and that's close to God. Everything that is different is understood as ugly, as not beautiful. This explains a lot of the racism and the discrimination Black people suffer all over the world. The patterns of beauty and aesthetics that we know is an universal pattern of Eurocentric thinking. And in my book, at the end of it, I propose a decolonization of Black bodies. And by decolonizing, I do not mean to overpower Eurocentric aesthetics and beauty and patterns. I do not intend to overpower it, to take over it. I don't. I propose by an Afrocentric perspective. That's not what I propose. What I propose is decolonizing this way of thinking and getting a plural perspective, that a plural perspective or a pluriperspectivism that welcomes all different ways of being, of producing knowledge, producing beauty, producing epistemologies, knowledge itself. So it's in the book, I develop it a little bit further and I bring some examples from a historic point of view and contextual and empirical information and data. But overall, it's basically it. I have been invited to talk at different universities and to different audiences, and it's been a very enriching experience because people have been sharing their understand of beauty, and a very simple, very humble woman who read my book. She's from my family. She's my aunt. She is not an academic. She has never been abroad. She worked as a maid for 20 years. And she read my book and she came to me and said, I've never thought that I one day would read something that Plato wrote. And I read in your book and I understood. I know now that Plato said that beauty is an idea. It has to do with the way we think beauty is. And now I feel a lot more intelligent. And I said, yes, yes, Auntie, that's it. Plato thought that beauty was an idea. And then my aunt said, I won't be straightening my hair anytime soon. If people want to accept me, they do. If they don't, I don't care. And that was such a thrill. It was such an emotional moment for me because I did not write my book for my peers, my doctor peers. I wrote my book for people to understand. For peers, I write academic articles all the time, but to my aunt, it was the first time that I wrote, and my text has been reaching a lot of people, and people have been sharing their experiences, and this has been so rewarding.
If you could tell us the name of your book, and then if you wouldn't mind, it would be great if each ambassador could briefly introduce herself or himself, then we can maybe go back to discussion and ask some questions of Professor Joao.
It's called Racismo Estético, Decolonizando os Corpos Negros, and it's available on Amazon website.
Hi, my name is Josiane. I am from Xinguara, from Pará State. I am studying international relations, and thank you so much for staying here with us, Dr. John.
I am Gabriel. I'm from Recife, but I live in Campo Grande, in Mato Grosso do Sul. I also study international relations. I think it's very interesting subject. Your book, it talks about many stuff that we feel. It's like to feel that you fit in some place, you know. And I think that this happens to Black people, also happens to small groups of persons who have like the gay, LGBT, and other, you know, kind of situation. I think it's really nice when you feel that you are represented.
My name is Ariadne Bogo. I'm from Curitiba, but I live in João Pessoa. I'm 22 years old, and I'm studying system analysis and development at Uninter University. And I'm really glad that I came in this call. Actually, I have a lot of things that I wanted to talk about.
My name is Mayara Tocantins. I'm from Belém, but I'm currently living in Manaus in the state of Amazonas. I am studying languages, and thank you so much, João, for sharing your experiences. I guess, you know, it's a great opportunity for like white people like me to understand what it's like to be in the other side. So thank you so much.
My name is Poliana. I'm a physics student at Uninter. I already had the chance to read your book. It's really nice. I really liked all the examples. As Mayara said, you really send us how it is to, not exactly how, but just a little bit of taste on how it is to be Black in this world. So it's a really important subject to be talking about. So thank you.
My name is Lisiane. I am from Salvador, Bahia, and I am currently studying digital marketing. And thank you so much, Joao, for taking your time to meet with us today and share this amazing content. Much needed.
Hi, I'm Iris, and I'm currently living in Caraguatatuba, São Paulo. I currently take a degree in languages, and it has been great listening to you.
Hi, I'm Rafaela. I'm from Belém as well, but I live in Brasilia. I'm a lawyer, work in the Chamber of the Deputies, and I'm studying theology at Uninter. Actually, just my skin is white because my blood is not red, it's black. My father is Black, my grandfather is Black. It's a part of my father's family, and and for my mom's family, they are white. So I'm growing up with the culture, and for me, it was amazing to hear you, Joao.
Hi, everyone. My name is Felipe. I live in Vitória, and I'm studying computer engineering right now.
Bring up, please raise your digital hand, and then I will call on people. And the only time I will speak up is in the unlikely event that we have quiet, and in which case I can generate questions, as you all know.
My question is exactly about it. Well, my father is Black, and all my family of my father's sides is Black too. My siblings have Black features and complexions, and they didn't suffer the same prejudice that other people Black suffered. I read some articles and watched some videos of people fancy mixed children, but despising the Black culture. I want to know, João, why do you think that societies is capable of accepting the mixed children, mixed people, but not truly the Black?
Thank you, Josiane, for your question. Well, when we talk about racism, the concept of racism itself was created by European white people to distinguish people who were different from them. They named people Black, they named people indigenous, they named the others. without being aware that when you name the other, you automatically name yourself. You exist as a person because you're not me. When I name you, I name me because the distinction between you and me that makes me name you. So that's how the concept of race exists. People discriminating, not notoriously speaking, people distinguishing, that's a better word, the other. So in amongst this, when this process of this describing the other, naming the other took place, it was to subjugate, to enslave the others, the Black community, the Black people in Africa, the indigenous people in South America, in Central America, for example. So everything that was directly related and that resembled these people was discriminated against. Their skin tone, complexion, their culture, their language, the ratio. There is a thinker and he's a linguist he's from Salvador, Gabriel Nascimento, who has published a book about linguistic racism. And he explains how this linguistic racism took place when the cultures of other people were destroyed and another culture was imposed over them. So in order to take over their land and their space and their treasures, they needed to destroy their culture first. So everything that had something to do with the Black appearance was rejected. When you, as in other people, it doesn't matter if Rafaela's father is Black, if her grandfather is Black, if her entire father's family is Black, if she does not resemble, if she does not have in herself the features of a Black person, she will not be discriminated against as a Black person will. She will experience what we call passability, the opportunity to be around freely without suffering in her skin the consequences of racism. So when you asked me about mixed people and why some people are suffer a lot of prejudice whilst others suffer a light prejudice in Brazil, because this happens here in America, the kind of racism that exists in London, where I lived for 2 years, the kind of racism that exists there is different. It doesn't matter if you're light-skinned Black or if you're a dark-skinned Black person, you are a Black person. And you suffer the racism and the prejudice because of that. In Brazil, the way I suffer prejudice is different from the way my husband, for example, suffers prejudice. He is dark Black. He is almost an African person. And the way he faces prejudice is a way different from the way I suffer prejudice. Because people sometimes look at me and say, oh, you're not Black, you are moreno. You are not Black, you are marrom bombom, you are something else. As being Black were something bad, as if being Black were something wrong. So the the stronger are the characteristics, the features of Blackness in someone, the stronger will be the prejudice that the stronger will be the stronger will be the prejudice that this person will face. So I believe that it's a question. It has something to do with the aesthetics. It has something to do with the phenotypic features. Yes, if it's phenotypic, it has to do with the biology. It has to do with what people see and what they consider beautiful and not, or not, what they consider some people would say that you're not Black, your nose is not large enough, your lips are not thick enough, your bone structure is not that outlined, they would say to me when I was younger. Because in my family, there are indigenous Brazilian people and Black people. That does not take my Blackness. There's a writer that, I forgot her name, but I'll check that and I'll let you know, that says, become Black, tornar-se negro. In Brazil, become Black is an ideology, is a way of thinking. You see, many people deny their Blackness and their features. Many people try to straighten their hair and try to wear light makeup, as I talk in the book. But does that actually change the person's Blackness? How effective is that? When you go to you, for example, when you go to America or you go to Europe, people will look at you and they will not recognize in you a white person. You're not white. There, you will not have the possibility of a white person as you freely have here. You see, and sometimes people do not understand that. They do not understand that when they see artists who are Black, who are inserted in the Black community, but they are super light skin tone. And they think, in Brazil, some people would call them white people. But the whiteness of Brazilians many times is rejected as white, but is rejected by the whiteness of Eurocentric people. Well, I hope I could shed some light.
Coming from what you're saying, I lived in US for a year in Kansas, and I'm considered in Brazil white. But in United States, I wasn't white. I was Latin American. So it was something different. And you are treated different because of that. But as I think most of Brazilians, I have a mixed family. And I think one of the features that I don't have as a passability kind of is my hair, my curly hair. And it's funny because not funny, actually, it's extremely sad how even that one thing that you don't have that is from the white culture and what is accepted as beauty is the thing where people are gonna say about you. When I moved, I'm from Curitiba and I came to João Pessoa. When I moved here, I went to the school and I was 12 years old. The first thing that they said about me was, okay, hi. You could straighten your hair. You could get your hair straight. You're pretty, but you could get your hair straight. And one of the only features that I have that represents my ancestrality, that is important to me. And you were saying about the thing that Black people in Brazil, they want to kind of take out their own culture because of all the pressure they have to be something that they are not, because they're not accepted as they are. And that reminds me of my grandma. She's Black. She has a really dark skin, a really dark one. And she suffers prejudice. She suffers racism. She lives in Curitiba, for example. She lives in a middle class building, and she lives there for about 10 years. And every time she goes to the elevator with one woman specifically, the woman goes and asks her, are you a maid? And she says, no, I'm not a maid. I live here. And then she goes again. And then other time, are you a maid? Like every time she goes into the elevator and the woman she asks her that. And it gets to her. It gets to her really strongly because you see, she kind of gets in a contradictory, I don't know how to say that, because she says like, she loves her hair. Her hair is extremely curly. She loves it, but she can't say she's Black. She says, no, I'm not Black. I'm moreninha, as you said, and that remind me. Recently, when I started reading and listening to Black people, I started to say to her when she said, no, I'm moreninha, like, no, you are Black. And that's beautiful. And it's okay. And the problem is not with you because it gets so hard on her. And actually, I do have a question about that. How would you think is the best way for her to deal with something like that? In that perspective, to get in an elevator every time for 10 years and the same person asks her something that is extremely racist.
So let me just hop in for 1 second before Professor Joao responds. We have about 10 minutes left, and I'm happy to go a little bit over. It's not going to be a problem on my end. I just know that people had set aside the time, so I want to get in the questions in the time that we have, and then if possible, we can extend. So Poliana and Felipe either had questions or comments. If either of you has a question, maybe we could group those together so that Professor and Lisiane, so that Professor Joao can think about bringing things together or taking them in sequence. And I just want to make sure that everybody who's here is able to listen to the answers.
Actually, my question is a lot related to what Ariadne already asked, but it's more not from the perspective of the person who is suffering prejudice, but from us like witnessing something on the supermarket or on the mall. Like, what are the actions that you suggest that we take to avoid that kind of thing?
My question is this. Throughout human history, several people have contributed in relevant way to society. As example, I can say Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Machado de Assis, Pelé, all of whom are remembered and recognized for their knowledge and work. Don't you believe that when discussing issues such as racial aesthetics, we take young people away from the search of knowledge and work, themes that are more central to people's lives, and focus on subjects that may create resentful people and divide more and more society?
I live in the city that is called the most African city outside Africa, Salvador. Even though I see a lot of people like me around, I don't see them on jobs that request higher qualifications. And this reflects, of course, the process of colonialism. You were talking about how Black people suffer with a lot of stereotypes created. And you remind me of Granda Quilomba. She said that they tend to put in the other things that they don't identify in themselves: the sexuality, the savagery, the violence, and other things. Because Brazil is a very racist country. And Josiane asked you about the fact why light-skinned mixed kids were more accepted than dark-skinned people. And this reminded me a little bit of colorism. The beauty market in Africa, there's a lot of women that are buying products to light their color of skin to be more accepted by society. And this, of course, reflects too on the way Black people see themselves in society. You remind me too about the Black feminism, because you were saying that while in Europe they were deciding what is science, what is beauty, we were working. And while the feminism, they were fighting to work to get job. The Black women were already working, already suffering. So our fights are completely different.
They are parallel. The white feminists put everything together, but they were not fighting for the Black women. They were out on the street fighting for the right of vote and to work, whilst there were Black women working at their houses. That's the main theme in Grada Quilombo and Sueli Carneiro and all of them. So they're not completely different. They're parallel, but when we talk about feminism, but when we talk about Black feminism, there is a gap.
Well, my question is, what are some ways you think the studies of linguistics, especially here in Brazil, can help in fighting the linguistic racism, which is so in the society right now that we may not even realize it?
Joao, my question is, I see that still to today, our media still have a stereotypical vision of the Black community. Like, we don't really have a change view. I want to know your opinion. How do you think we could make a better representation of the Black people?
Well, I'll start off with Felipe's question, because I think it is central to everything, all the questions that need to be answered. When we talk about race, when you have a Black person being killed every 23 minutes, there is nothing more urgent in society than that. When you have Black LGBTQI people being killed because of their color, there's nothing more urgent than that. When you have in a country with over 50% of Black people amongst its population, but poorly represented in media, in jobs like in work market, as someone has posed, in positions of decision making and power, when you have such a racial inequality that drive people and draw people to that bury people, you have a huge problem. It's not a matter of knowledge production and creating things. And what's the point in creating something if the inequality among people will prevent others to have access to that? It doesn't matter if the person is talented and is one of the best musicians world has ever known. Nina Simone, I'm talking about her. She was approved in first place in the Music Academy in New York, but she could not start her course because she was Black. And the same prejudice has been dragged all over history. So yes, in a society where inequality dictates the rules and establishes who lives and who dies, yes, it needs to be talked about. When I tell white kids that they should not, must not actually discriminate against anybody, when I teach them that, I probably am seeding adults who will be more conscious. So the racial conflict all over the world, the racial conflict that enslaved African people who were trafficked all over the world and enslaved and killed. This conflict that has been around for centuries, who destroyed only in Brazil over 6 million people that have been registered in Rio, that entered here. In Potosí, Bolivia, over 8 million indigenous people were killed because of racism and racial discrimination. It doesn't matter what productions men have built, or how intelligent and how smart, or how beautiful their concepts of knowledge and beauty is. It doesn't matter. If you have a racial inequality that destroys people's lives and prevents people from achieving and living and being free to express who they are, how they are, you have a huge, serious problem in society. When someone asks me, how should I react to a person who has been coming to me and saying, oh, do you work here for 10 years? Well, I need to strengthen my sense of identity. And I need to point and say, look, you know I do not, you have been asking me for 10 years if I work here or not. You know that I live here. You are such a racist. Shame on you. Do not address me like that. I am a Black person. I live here. I know who I am. I know my self-worth, my identity. That drives me, that motivates me to tell Black people that they are beautiful. They do not need Ariadne to straighten their hair. You do not. And although you have the white passability as a young lady in Brazil, that does not prevent you from being anti-racist and being an advocate for equality and justice and pointing your finger and saying, this is racism. When you see somebody has mentioned a supermarket event where someone suffers discrimination against, is discriminated against, when you see that, when you do not do anything and when you do not say anything, you are being racist too. If in your mind, deep within your soul, you do not agree with that, but you don't do anything, do not say anything, well, I'm glad to say that you are racist. Your silence makes you racist too. So you need to put your foot down and say, no, this is racism. This is discrimination. You cannot talk to her like this. And you need to be anti-racist all the time. You need to be anti-sexist all the time. You need to fight for equality, for justice all the time. So that's why I wrote racismo estético decolonizando os corpos negros, because I would like Black people to understand how beautiful they are, how beautiful our culture is, how beautiful our aesthetics is, and that we do not need to fit within an universalizing aesthetics. We don't. Different aesthetics can live together. They can be seen together in society. It's not taking Black or Afrocentrism over Eurocentrism. No, that's not. That's colonizing. What we want to see is people free to be who they are. So we need this racial education strongly that will give people strength enough to put their foot down. Because when you put your foot down and you shout against racism and discrimination, people around you, they get stronger and they shout with you. And when you see you have, all those people saying no to racism, to discrimination, that has happened to me. It happened last week when I was at the supermarket and the security was following a Black man, and I saw that. And when the man confronted the security, I confronted too. I helped him. I said, yes, I saw you following him. Do you think that because he's a Black person, he's going to steal anything here? And people who were around came and helped. It's a collective, but that collective only works when you have a self, when your identity is strengthened. So you need to read about feminism if you are a woman. You need to read about feminism if you are a man. You need to read about anti-racism literature if you are white. You need to read about anti-racism if you are Black. And ignorance, we fight with information and knowledge. I have walked a few miles, but I know there is a lot more to walk. And in this road, I'm very glad to meet people like you guys, and keep it up.
Thank you very much for being in touch. Thank you very much for pushing back and pushing forward. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge.